What's up, guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. It has been a little while since I've done an update of any kind in this building. Getting into all of that right this second might be a little overwhelming, so I decided to break it up into specific topics, starting with an update on our ozone system. It has been a year since we first installed ozone units in our tanks, and now we have a total of 3 units running on our 3 largest systems. Each of these systems is 2,500 gallons, and it turns out that the smallest Ozotech Poseidon unit, the 200 model, is just good enough to keep up with that volume. We monitored our ozone with a probe on the Neptune controller, as well as a handheld ORP pen that we would calibrate pretty frequently with reference solutions. What we found after a year is a steady level on the Poseidon unit, and just to keep it right there. Elephant in the room. Am I happy with the results? In short, I'm very happy with it. My only expectation going in was to have it clarify my water, and to that end, it's done a great job. There's a big difference between having the unit running and having it off. The water, when it's running, practically sparkles. I have to say, though, that there is this underrated benefit, and that being odor control. This being a coral farm, one expects it to have a little bit of that briny ocean smell, and that's one of those things that's kind of par for the course. The greenhouse next door, for example, certainly has that smell. In this building, there's basically no odor at all. When we're emptying the skimmer cups, it does smell for a few hours, but after that, nothing. There's a lot of salt water in this building, and you would expect some kind of odor, but all of it is basically getting neutralized. There might be a benefit with ozone's ability to break down organic compounds that corals use for warfare with one another. And that's a difficult thing to quantify for us. It might be going on, but I can't put my finger on any particular observation where I could say, yeah, that's happening because of ozone. Just thinking to myself, it must be doing something because just the very nature of ozone is so reactive. As an aside, I think that there's a little bit of a misconception of ozone's use as a sterilizer. In commercial wastewater treatment, ozone sometimes is used, but the concentrations necessary to sterilize water is very high. In fact, out of the box, I don't think these units can even get to that level with the size of these systems. It would either take many more units running at the same time, or an oxygen concentrator to boost the production of ozone. Either way, I am not sure that you want to be cranking sterilization levels of ozone into your tank at all. You will probably, unsurprisingly, kill everything. The biggest change to the system is how we decided to organize it on this wall. Previously, our ozone generator was tucked under one of the equipment stands along with some other controls. After a while, we figured out that this really isn't the best implementation. What we decided to do instead was to allocate a section of the wall and dedicate an area just for this ozone system and protein skimmer. You may be wondering, why the skimmer? The way that ozone is introduced into a tank is that it has to get sucked in either by a protein skimmer or an ozone reactor. The ozone generator doesn't send the ozone. So, again, needs to be pumped with either an air pump or sucked in by a venturi on a skimmer, let's say. In our setup, we have it hooked up to the intake of our protein skimmer. So, if we need to turn off the skimmer for some reason, we really should also be turning off the ozone unit. Otherwise, it will just sit there cranking away making ozone. It may or may not make a difference, but, it's one of those things, probably best practice to turn it off. That brings us to this set of switches. You know how your router or cable modem every now and again needs to be power cycled? And those devices are so dumb because they don't even have a power switch. You have to unplug it and plug it back in. At least mine do. It's the dumbest thing ever. Well, I don't know about your skimmer, but on my skimmers, sometimes when I fire them back up after doing some kind of maintenance, they just go crazy and overskim. And we're not talking about it's just a little bit off. It's like 5 times way overdone, and it'll just empty your tank if you let it. I have to turn them off for a second and turn them back on, and usually that gets them working at their regular operating level. It's a super minor thing, but it is so much easier to do that from a switch panel than tracking down a power cord. If you're curious, the switch panel is just one of those American DJ switches. The last thing about these switches is that it makes it obvious from across the room what is running. Everything is labeled nicely, so there's less room for confusion. Once you get to a facility-sized project, having things be really open and obvious makes it far less likely for stuff to get mistakenly left on or off. Actually, now that I think of it, this kind of makes sense for your home aquariums as well. Because how many times have you gone on vacation and had to explain to somebody looking after your tank about some obscure thing to turn off or on? It's situations like this where labels come in real handy. All right, last point about this whole wall relocation is that it makes everything much more accessible, specifically this corona discharge stuff. When this Poseidon unit was under the stand, it's a little bit too out of sight, out of mind. These units don't need a lot of maintenance, but they require some. Every so often, it's good practice to open the unit up and clean out the system to make sure that there aren't too many gunked up deposits, because those reduce the efficiency of the unit. Also, periodically, it's a good practice to replace that corona discharge unit that's inside there. Having it all located on the wall at chest height makes all that easier and thus more likely to actually happen. One thing that people worry about a lot with ozone is the health risk of breathing it in. That was a worry that I had as well. What I decided to do was not really even guess at it. They make ozone air monitors, so I just got one. These units are a few $100s, but they will give a warning when you are in danger. These little light up things will go from green to yellow to red, and lucky for us, we've always been in the green. We have it just a few feet away from a protein skimmer, and honestly, we've never seen it get above 0 basically. The only way that we were able to get it to read any higher was to set it on top of the skimmer where the ozone was coming out. And even there, it wasn't registering anything above what's safe by OSHA guidelines. It was like 2 bars or something. So guys, if you wanted to try ozone and wanted some extra peace of mind, a device like this is an option. All right, so next steps for ozone. It may be a distant future project, but I would like to find a way to install ozone on the systems in my greenhouse. The challenge there is that those tanks are sitting in, well, a greenhouse that is a whole lot more humid than this building. It's a challenge, but not altogether impossible. The issue with humidity specifically is that the nitrogen in the air, in combination with humidity, will make a deposit on the inside of a corona discharge device. Over time, it'll make that unit very inefficient. What could fix this for us is if I bought an oxygen concentrator. In addition to it being a desiccant that removes some of the humidity, it swaps out a lot of that nitrogen for oxygen, thus making it less likely to form deposits even in the presence of humidity. Side benefit, it greatly supercharges your ozone generation. So the entire greenhouse, theoretically, could be run off of a single ozone generator. Again, we've got a lot on our plate for right now, so this kind of project is distant future at best, but it is something that we're looking at. Okay guys, to sum it up, after a year, I really like what ozone brings to our systems, and I'm glad that I finally took the plunge and decided to try it out. That does it from here. Happy reefing.